Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Longside podcast. Another week, another win for Burnley Football Club. It is absolutely fantastic, and that is my voice going top of there. Apologies about that. Very professional. Anyway, big win away at Luton, which I expected literally a draw, and they keep winning. It's quite frustrating now to everyone, but not to us. And some big news going into this game on Tuesday night away at Millwall. If we do win, then we do confirm our place in the championship for next year. Today, as we're going to find out that we will not be relegated. So happy days, pop the champagne. So let's get into the topic of discussion for today's podcast. We've got some great guests on the way, and we're going to be seeing them quite soon. But I want to highlight some recent videos on some channels on YouTube going into the High Performance podcast that was launched by Humphreys, I believe. That was a pundit as well, and quite a respectable fellow, and a great podcast as well. Sean Dyche took part on that podcast for the second time, and he had quite a few comments about the board and about his time at Burnley, and especially how it ended. So we're gonna go into that quite soon. Also, breaking down our review on the Luton game on Saturday, including that, previewing the game against Millwall on Tuesday. So, with that said, I hope you guys do enjoy, and let's get into the discussion. Introducing Nathan, who is a regular on my Twitter Spaces, if you've been listening on them. So, how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Good.
Well, good time to be a Burnley fan, of course. And Sam as well at the ClaretsRoundUp. How you doing, pal?
I'm not bad, mate. Are you?
I mean, we keep saying it, but Burnley are class, aren't they? They're absolutely class. 11 points clear at the top of the table. If I were to say this to you guys back in August, how many drugs do you think I was on?
Probably doesn't warrant saying, to be fair. I think it's quite a good time. And there was a video that popped up on my Twitter today of Burnley v Newcastle in a friendly in Portugal, and seeing just how disjointed and just generally poor we were. I think I'd have said that you'd have been on a lot. I'll leave it at that, a lot.
Didn't we play like 3 or 4 separate friendlies with like 3 or 4 different teams, and we lost each one like disastrously?
Didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had like 3 or 4 separate teams playing, and we still lost each one by like 4-0, 5-0 each time. I think one game was like 2-1. Mm-hmm. That feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So let's go into the Luton game first. So going into this game, I'll go to you, Sam, first. What was your expectations?
I mean, they're a good side. You know, the difference in certain game weeks in the Championship when you come up against certain teams like, I don't know, like Rotherham's and teams like that, you do feel a little bit more confident. Playing against Luton, they're on fire at the minute. I mean, I think they played a Friday night game against QPR and absolutely dismantled them. Like, they've got a good team, a good style of play, and Rob Edwards has got them playing some great football. I personally didn't think I'd have taken a draw at the start of the game. Let's say that I would have been happy with a draw. To come away with all 3 points is huge. Just testament to how good we are.
Yeah, and it was quite a tough game as well, especially that first half. Nathan, at half time, where would you rank that first half in terms of the worst performances of this year? Because really, I can only really say Sunderland away the first half and Sheffield United in that second half. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's got to be up there. I think in terms of probably the lack of chances we created, not so much the defensive work. I thought the defensive work on the whole in the first half was okay, acceptable enough to get in at 0-0. But I think, in terms of going forward, it's one of the worst I've seen us in a long while.
And half-time here, we all kind of expected maybe a change to come, and there wasn't, which may be a surprise, as really nothing was working. I think Taylor was acting like a striker almost. Barnes was dropping way too deep. There were no really players on the left-hand side that wide. Matson and Brown was trying to like fill some space, but didn't really work. Johan was kind of just hidden to the right-hand side as well. It really felt like unlike Burnley recently, but a disjointed performance in that first half. And in second half, to you, Sam, what do you think changed?
I've said it before so many times. We are now officially the best second half team in the Championship because we've got a fantastic manager who can get into the lads at half time and say, "Listen, lads, I'm not being funny, but like whatever you're doing tonight ain't working. We need you to sort it out." And in the game, he has the ability to change things around. But we also have some very, very high quality players that know themselves that it's not good enough. And they'll all go in, have a discussion and say, what can we do better? And every second half, we come out flying. I can't remember the last time we had a second half so bad other than Sheffield United.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, we other than that, which was we got dismantled in the second half, but we've had a lot more poor first halves than we have second halves. And the thing that we've got going for us now is, in comparison to the older days, we have a poor first half with 3-4-0 down. Now we're staying in games and we're giving ourselves a chance. And I think, again, testament to company and testament to the team.
Yes, and adding to that as well, as you said, if we had a poor first half, we couldn't really ever rectify that, because if we ever look to our bench, we've got Liam Vizeh and Aaron Lennon, and that's it. The rest of the kids are Kevin Long and Phil Bardsley, and just 5,000 goalkeepers also on the bench as well. Like, it was disastrous back in the days. And we'll go into Sean Dyche and what happened at the end as well later on. So to you, Nathan, that second half, what do you think changed and what gave us a win in that day? And what do we think that we've learned about this squad?
If I'm being honest, I don't actually think a lot changed until Vitinho come on. Genuinely, I think the introduction of Vitinho won us that game. I think in terms of, like what Sam was saying, the options in terms of squad depth and general squad quality, that won us the game. That were it. I don't think we were absolutely streets better than them in any department whatsoever throughout the game. I just thought it were a bit of impetus from Vitinho to want to get at people, want to commit them, not just try and play the safe ball for fear of turning it over. That actual desire to go and get at them, commit them, force them into a mistake, which obviously led to the penalty. And I think, again, I don't actually think we've learned a lot about the squad. I think we know how good some of the players are that are on our bench, and it's just a case of introducing them. Introduced Vitinho, that bit of impetus, got a penalty and won us the game. So, perfect substitution for me.
And that was exactly what got us the win, because him doing that little, flick behind him, if that was Teller maybe there, he would not have done that. If it was anyone else, Gudmundsson, he would not have done that. So maybe that bit of flair that he has, that's what got the penalty, and that was the difference on the day. And going into the players, all in all, no one had a particularly bad game for example. Maybe some people may have been a bit more kind of off the boil compared to what we are used to them. For example, I saw a few people pointing at maybe Ian Maatsen, saying that maybe he wasn't the best that we've seen in recent weeks. But would you say that's a bit unfair? Because in reality, defensively, I thought it was pretty good.
I think that's one of the main letdowns of Ian Maatsen from what I've seen sat in the cricket field. Whenever you sat behind him and you see a man coming at him one-on-one, you always think he's going to get beaten. But then it's a case of getting around on the cover, which he does well. And I thought generally throughout the entire Luton game, he's defending one-on-one with balls coming over his head. In the transition, I thought he would bang on. So, yeah, I think it's hard because when Brownhill's dropping into that pocket to engage with Maatsen, shift the ball and create a chance, I thought Brownhill were off it against Luton. So it kind of stifles much of the attacking threat that he's got as well. So,
when it comes to Brownhill as well, people have also mentioned about Brownhill recently. He's not, again, had bad games, but maybe can blur into matches a bit too often recently compared to at the start of the year. Wigan away, Luton at home, for example, and Blackpool at home. We saw him get involved in the goals a lot more often. And recently, maybe he's took a bit of a step back in terms of his attacking input, I guess you could say. Sam, in terms of Josh Brownhill, how do you see him in our system?
I think he works well. He's a good runner, willing runner, wins the ball back a lot. He closes his man down brilliantly. I think everybody's entitled to a bit of a blip at some point, especially when he's had the start that he had to the season. I mean, it was inevitable. He was never keeping that pace up all year round, for the full season. I mean, we were on like 6 goals in the first 6 game weeks. Like, for an attacking midfielder, that's quite absurd. But he's been good, and I'll continue to back him in that position. I think he's a good player for us. Like I said, even just for the running around alone. And I think the only reason why he's taken that step back in such an attacking sense was because when we weren't clicking as much at the start of the season, you sometimes thought, where are our goals coming from? Like, because Jay, he wasn't hitting the ground running. Barnes, started the game against Huddersfield, and you kind of were thinking, does he fit the system? And then, out of nowhere, Brownhill's scoring. But then now we get goals from Zaruri, we get goals from Teller, we get goals from Obafemi off the bench. Vitinho pops up with goals, and then we've got fullbacks that like to attack and score goals. So, I think it's less ownership on Brownhill and more players have come into their own and are now taking a bit more ownership in going forward. So, yeah, I back Brownhill still, definitely.
That does remind me to earlier in the year when we went through that run of just non-stop draws and all 1-1 draws, the Birmingham away, Stoke at home. That was, I was there that game as well. And that was just like, it was infuriating.
Mm-hmm.
Cardiff away, 1-1 draw. Preston away, 1-1 draw. West Ham away, 1-1 draw. It felt like we were still in that stage of the year. We all felt like we saw something. We saw the team in their system, but it was still quite raw. And seeing all these new players gelling in with the old guard too, Jack Cork, Barnes, J Rod, and the like as well. And we could all see it, but you had to really have faith. You had to believe in Vincent Kompany and believe in the players, thinking that eventually they will click. Eventually, Benson and Zaruri and Teller, they will all understand to a very deep understanding of each other where they will be in the pitch. So in terms of going from that transition to where we were to where we are now, what would you put down as the number one thing that's caused that? I'll go to you first, Nathan.
I think it's hard to put a finger on it. I think we were doing all the right things earlier on in the season. It was just going to sleep, I think, that were costing us. I remember I was sat behind the goal in the cricket field against Stoke, scratching my head as to how we'd not won the game. I can't actually remember it. I don't know if it was the lap or something that popped up with a header. And
Some lad. I don't know. It wasn't the lad.
We battered them for 85, 86, 87 minutes and just couldn't get through. I think one of the things that I've liked personally that I don't recall seeing at the start of the season was the inverted runs from the fullbacks. So Roberts tends to do it more than Maatsen because Maatsen will go on the outside. But Roberts coming inside, I think it was oh Christ. There were a goal that Roberts scored James Hargreaves. It might have been. And he's just played a little 1-2 with Brownhill, knocked it round the corner, down between the fullback and the centre-back, got in and done that. I think it's all tiny little minute details and sharpening up at the back, which don't want to slate one of the old guard, but Bayer, Harwood Bellis, Ekdal and Alderkeel, they've all been switched on at all times. I think obviously there's been a couple of little mistakes here and there, but nothing truly horrendous to worry about. I think there was that stage of draws, and then defensively, I think we've been pretty all right, at least for the rest of the season. So, yeah, more tightening up defensively, not going to sleep and being able to grind out a 1 or a 2, a 1 or a 2-0 win. So that's what's changed for me.
Well, speaking of 1-0 and 2-0 wins, I loved looking back on the post-match comments by Vincent Kompany because in that interview, he kind of like paused and laughed saying, we spoke to the players before the game and, we're still Burnley. And I love that from him because we have, in a short space of time, kind of become a team that we always felt like we can get at. So when we were in the Prem, we saw teams like Bournemouth or teams like Fulham or Norwich come to turf and think, just get out these, be physical, and they'll fall apart. And that's how teams really now look at us and think, well, we can't beat them technically. We can't beat them in terms of quality. So really, you're just going to be physical and try to get at them, like what Sheffield United did to us. So I love the fact that company still ingrains that and reminds them the fact that we're still Burnley. We're still a physical side with the likes of Taylor and Cork and Brownhill and Barnes that's been there and done that and got the Premier League experience, the medal to show it. And that's why I want to give some love to Taylor, because before kickoff, a few, I guess, doubts about him being in the lineup ahead of Dyche, who of course has been great as well. And just want to back Taylor because I think each time he's been on the pitch this year, I thought he's been fantastic. Sorry for going a bit of a tangent there, Sam. Where would you see the transition from early in the year to where we are now, and particularly that Burnley feeling still being there? Because we saw it at Luton, we saw it at Stoke.
Yeah. Also, I want to back you with that. Taylor has been immense whenever he's been called upon this season, so I back that completely. The biggest thing for me is time. There is no way any football club goes through a transition like we did, where you get relegated, you get rid of all your key players, you make 70 million quid, you're left with about 8 senior members of the squad, and a new manager comes in after a manager's been there for 10 years with a style of play, brand new owners from a year before, and everything hits the ground running. It takes time. We bedded in 16 new players in the summer, and then we got 5 in January, but one of them's gone out on loan. Like, everything takes time. You've got to bed players in slowly. And at the start of the season, I feel like everybody, and I said it so many times, you have to back the team, you have to back the players, and it isn't always going to work instantly, but eventually it will click. Whether it's this season, next season, 10 years from now, Burnley will be back in the Premier League, and it'll be exciting once again. Never in my wildest dreams did I think 5-6 months later, we're top of the table by 11 points. We've scored the most goals, and people around the world are comparing us with teams like Barcelona for goals scored, teams like Real Madrid for goals conceded. It's ridiculous. We're getting all the accolades, and rightfully so. We deserve it. We've been insane to watch, and we deserve every single bit of praise.
Making me tear up here, man. Jesus, that was quite emotional. Okay, so you spoke up the board in quite a very emotional dialogue right there. Mm-hmm. So let's get into the title of this podcast, and that is about Sean Dyche and about his comments about our ownership, and including that as well is time at the end of his career at Burnley and kind of what went wrong. So I've got some quotes here from the High Performance podcast. And it's a great podcast, of course. Feel free to give it a listen as well after listening to this, because I think that it's a great insight in terms of Sean Dyche and what happened at that club. So in terms of the first quote here, so when he was asked, is there a moment that he predicted his time at Burnley would come to an end, he said the following: I think the change of ownership of when the structural side of what we put in place starts changing, and you think, oh, right. Do you realize where you're taking this? Do you realize the challenges? We formed a way of operating at Burnley, scouting, science, analytics, always looking at being modern thinking. However, there was a base that was in place. So when that starts changing, you think, hang on a minute. If you're going to change that and start changing this, then we need to get people and add people that are here. You can't do one thing with the same people and then do another thing with the next, because the people need changing as well. And that's quite a lot to take in. So in terms of just that 2 quotes right there by Sean Dyche, how would you take that in, Nathan?
Face value of it, his timer up as soon as the new owners come in. I think they give the whole verbal PR nonsense of, we back Sean to the hill, we've given him a new 5-year contract, blah, 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 blah. But I think deep down he knew. He knew that his time were up when the new owners come in. And in terms of going what he said of we've built a way of working here. Yes, correct, up until the time that he got sacked. But I think if we'd have, by some minor miracle, stayed up last year, this season we'd have been paced between an inch of his life. You'd have had Westy and Cork both losing the legs, Cork of which has been bloody class for us. Tarky wouldn't have stayed, so that would have been replacing him. Ben Mee, from what he's come out and said on a different podcast, which was quite an interesting listen because he didn't really praise Dyche at all. wanted some kind of management role alongside playing. I think you'd have lost Pope, obviously you'd have lost Corney. I think you'd have probably kept McNeil, but even still, the base of that team was going to fall apart. So for me, yeah, parts of that just don't really sit right with me.
Sam?
I think Dyche has always been a realist. I think that's one of the things, a lot of Burnley fans can back him on. And I think he knew when the new owners came in that the vision that was there 10 years ago when he started, and he's been there for this entire journey of the club, that vision was about to change. And that's because owners come in and, these owners especially, they want to be, and it might sound really stupid, but they want to be a bit more trendy. They don't want to be, dinosaurs in every department. When we went and got everything around the stadium, like all the new boards and stuff like that, like that's to change something, and then you get style of play, bringing players in, bringing a manager like Vincent Kompany in who's young, hungry, and things like that. Things like that for us needed to change. And I think the owners knew that. And I think Dyche, like you say, Dyche will have known, I don't fit this mold now. I don't fit this tactical style of play that you maybe want. You want a bit more going forward. And, I don't like to be massively critical on, Dyche and that era, but those last 2 years, it was so boring. Like, and if you're any genuine self-respecting Burnley fan, you also deep down know that. You know that the football that we played at the turf and going to games thinking we could get battered here every single week, and you were doing that against teams in mid-table, teams just above you, like like the Aston Villas. They could come off a 4-0 romping the week before, and you'd think there's no chance we win this. And I think Dyche, like I say, he's just being a realist in that sense. I think he's just trying to say, listen, I know where they want to go, and I know I don't fit that.
Okay, I understand that. Before I get into the other quotes, I see a comment here by Burnley Monday saying, long and short of it, Dyche really didn't give a hoot about us anymore. He's moved on, so should we. And I understand that. And I do also agree that we have moved on and we should move on. However, because Burnley are so good right now, it's getting boring to talk about how good we are because we've already won the league at this stage pretty much. We need to find other ways to talk about Burnley. And because this is quite recent, 4 days ago, I think that it's quite relevant to talk about how things went down with Sean Dyche in the last year, and particularly his thoughts about our current board and ownership. So that's why I feel like it's relevant to talk about this right now. So furthering on, another quote here by Sean. So if you get six or so players here, guess what? They will only know the new structure. But the ones that were already here will know the old structure, and they will go, whoa, what's going on here? So then you get an odd reaction, and it changes the view and the culture of the squad. Some of the top heads will get confused on who to answer to, including the staff team. They will also ask who you're answering to now things have changed. The new ownership wanted to try to bring this in and bring that in. And I'm like, all right, but it's a slow burner. We need to be one step at a time. I was flexible to see what we can work with, adjust it, recruitment and stuff like that. The positive was the open-mindedness. To be open-minded to European players like Weghorst or Cornet. That's one problem with the old board, is that we needed to take more risk with player signings. The other side was, why are you sort of mixing and matching these ideas that may work over time, but not just like that? So go into that kind of quote, I kind of read it as basically they had the modern ideas that we've seen very recently in terms of bringing in players overseas, but the board of AOK and so wanted to implement it instantly, in which Sean Dyche kind of felt like it wasn't going to work as fast as they wanted it to. I'll go to you again, Nathan, first. When you read that, do you think that is fair from Dyche's side or not?
It's hard to give a level opinion without sounding like I'm trying to slag him off, because he is a club legend. He'll always go down as a club legend. But I think I think really the proof's within the pudding. I think you had Sean Dyche who had an ageing group of players only playing one way and not even trying to deviate from that. Even when we were playing lower league opposition, like there were numerous times, Lincoln, Huddersfield in the season we got relegated, and that's just two off the top of my head where we thought, well, you'd think, well, the opposition are of a much lesser quality. Why don't I, knowing that Burnley are in trouble, try and play a different brand of football and see, can I teach some of these old dogs new tricks? But no, it was just same long ball, percentage football, win the knockdowns. And I think, like I said, proof in the pudding. You've got Dyche here who was somewhat stubborn to change. You've got Company here who's come in, had the squad ripped apart from underneath him. Got the new squad, got them playing. And I mean, some of our best players are some of our old guard. So Jack Cork, Johan Gudmundsson's really come into his own last couple of weeks. Josh Brownhill. And I mean, although he's not been scoring, Jay Rodriguez is a completely different player. So without trying to slag him off because he's a club legend, again, doesn't sit right with me and it stinks of sour grapes.
Sam, I'll also go to you with that same question and going into particularly what he felt like went wrong in terms of Pace trying to bring all these ideas, in his opinion, too fast.
It's a huge change. We had so much success under Dyche, a lot of success under Garlic in the early years, and eventually, when things change, you have to adapt. And if you can't adapt, you don't fit the mold. And in the scenario of manager and board, they have the power to say, all right, if you're not fitting our ideas, you can't be here. And they made that decision. And, the way things were going in the Premier League, I mean, that final season, I mean, it was an awful season until we had Mike Jackson in charge for those last 8 games. Like, then you finally got a little bit of hope towards the end of the season, but I was never totally, if we'd have stayed up, I agree with Nathan, I think it'd have been difficult, to stay up the following season, and we'd have been going through the same thing over and over again. I feel like this was something that, in my opinion, needed to happen. I think we needed, a total restructure, eventually an owner that wanted to dip into the European market and realize that, you pay a premium price for, homegrown players, and you can find gems in Europe. And I think for me, Dyche is a club legend and he has every right, in my opinion, to say, whatever he feels is his truth. But in the actual reality, his performance with the players that he had, performance-wise on the pitch, we were terrible. We were the lowest scoring team in the entire 92. We had the lowest amount of shots on target in the entire 92 at the point that he got sacked. We have now, unfortunately, seen a better version of Burnley come after he's gone. And I do agree there is probably an element of sour grapes there that he wasn't kept on for this project and now somebody's taken over and he's doing really well. But it's part of football. You don't do your job on one end and then somebody tells you, here's a change and you can't adapt. Unfortunately, you're the expendable piece in this situation, and that's what's happened.
I want to highlight a commentary by Matthew Norris in the chat. Of course, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, of course, you're watching this after the fact. But on YouTube, we are always streaming this live over here, so feel free and get involved when we are live and join in the conversation. So Matthew says, Dyche has been proved wrong by Pace. You've got to want to change, and Pace was able to do that all at once with company. He wouldn't with Dyche because he would drag his feet. And adding to that as well, before I go to you, Nathan, another quote by Sean Dyche directly to Alan Pace as, I guess, a word of advice, saying, and I quote, just take a breath, look at what's going on. Don't think that you're going to see it all in one day, because you're not. Let people revert back to normal, not this newness, and just give it a window to settle down, to get a clearer view. Nathan, how do you read that?
Resistant to change. I think with any transaction of a football club, there's an element of due diligence. I think unless you're one of these rich Saudis that and £1 billion pocket change, there's an element of due diligence. Now, he won't have come in thinking, well, I'm just going to put £20 million for this, in the Premier League, the best league in the entirety of football, and save a club that's been on the decline for the last 4 or 5 years. Again, I don't want to slag him off, but he just sounds really resistant to change. And I mean, there's been rumblings that came out, but again, don't really know how true they are. I think the big thing that spoke volumes to me about the end of Dyche's tenure is Ben Mee was on. He was on a podcast, something to do with Brentford, and didn't have a particularly good word to say about Dyche, which from the club captain and a guy who, from what I thought, bled claret and blue. It's a scathing analysis.
Yeah, that is one thing that, I mean, we've all moved on, right? So, of course, we're kind of reopening old wounds here, and I get that. But look, as I said earlier, Burnley are effing amazing right now. So we just keep talking about the same thing each week. We keep winning games. It's getting quite boring now. Never thought I'll say that I'm getting bored of winning, but that's the stage we're at now, boys, okay? And girls, of course, I'll listen. So before I go on to I'll ask you, Sam, Thomas Hargreaves in the chat said, loved the Dyche years, but the last 18 months were a hard watch. The reset under company has been amazing. New and old players have been brilliant, and pace and company has been able to build on an infrastructure that Garlick and Dyche built. And I remember, I think it was last podcast actually, that one of our guests, he actually said that company has renovated the house that Sean Dyche has built. And I like that analogy, the fact that Sean Dyche has built the foundations, the core of our house, our club for a decade almost. And then companies come in with these fancy lights, these fancy new wallpapers, this settee that's about 15 grand or something. Like it feels like an entirely new thing. It's nice and shiny, but the actual core foundations of the house, that's solid as a rock. And I like that analogy that I heard last week. So again, to kind of further on in terms of what Nathan said, what's your take on it?
The roots of Burnley will always stay the same. We're a town club, overachieving. Getting to the Premier League. We've stayed there for 6 years. Over time, you'll have highs and lows because we are still a town team, but keeping those values, like, for example, keeping within the community, things like that, making sure that we stick to the morals of working hard, and, you don't get any reward if you don't put in the hard work, and those morals from Dyche and those scenarios will still play out throughout the season, and company will still play on that. He'll still say, listen, we need to, you'll see it with Cork, you'll see it with Jay. They know what it's like to bust a gut week in, week out and make sure that you get 3 points. We still need to do that, but there's a different way of doing that. And this is my way, and this is how I'd like to do it. And I'd like to do it with good football, high press, inverted fullbacks, inverted wingers getting goals, scoring goals from everywhere. And yeah, I sometimes struggle with the whole Dyche situation, because towards the end of his tenure as manager, Mike Garlick wasn't a great owner either. Like, we weren't buying players at rapid rate. We weren't buying good players at rapid rate. We weren't spending, we weren't up there spend wise with, with Europe's elite like some of the other clubs are. And that team from the European season that looked really good on paper for 4 years never got any better. And you were seeing the same players week in, week out, and you could name the same lineup week in, week out. And there is an element of Garlick has a little bit to answer for towards the end of that. And the new owners had to come in and change elements of that, bringing in Cornet, bringing in Weghorst, and trying to get that new style and implement it quickly. This season is where we've had time to do that. And this season is why we're seeing the benefits from it.
It is quite incredible when you look back on what we were used to for so long, in terms of we knew the exact team that we're going to put out week in, week out. We knew exactly how we're going to play. We knew exactly what we're going to do. Like the game plan was pretty much against any team that was actually decent. Hope that it's 0-0 half time. Hope that it reaches the 70th minute and beg that we can score off a set piece. That was pretty much every single away game plan that we had for the last 5 years in Premier League, for the most part. Sometimes it worked and it was great and we laughed because it was almost pretty much like it was memeable at that stage. Like, we know what's going to happen, you know what's going to happen, but you can't stop it. And that was what we were used to. And to add also in terms of your comment about the owners, we spoke about it too on the last pod, that it was very much clear and that they would also agree the fact that the club completely outgrew them when they were owners. We had no money in the championship. It's a mid-table championship side. And the fact that we came that far, thanks to Sean Dyche and the wonders that he did at our club, they just simply couldn't compete. And I think that's fair to add as well. And one more quote from this podcast, and then we'll go into other topics as well. When asked about looking back, could he have embraced the newness more? Sean Dyche said, "Don't resist everything. Learn of it, because what happened if the next club are also like that? That newness is what happens with change. They've asked me to do this, and I said, yeah, that's my job. Not losing the sight of the basics. While we are doing that, we still got to win games. And I know what was wrong with that. We haven't invested. The team were losing that edge with age. It wasn't purely a ownership issue with the recent board, because the new owners would argue we didn't want to put a lot of money in because they were trying to buy the club. And the old owners would say, we don't want to put a lot of money in because we are trying to sell the club." So with that, I do have sympathy for Sean Dyche, because he simply wasn't backed by the board. And with the new board, again, couldn't put all the money in and didn't have it available instantly either. So Sean Dyche, as we all know, was basically relying on the same team for 2-3 seasons. What year was it? 1920. We spent 900 grand in an entire season in the Premier League on Will Norris and Dale Stephens, and we somehow still stayed up. I can look back on the bench that we had in that year, in that COVID year, 2021. I think again against West Brom at home, for example, that was a drab 0-0, like the worst game I've ever seen. You looked at the bench and it literally is kids and goalkeepers. And we stayed up with that. So even though we can be critical of Sean Dyche in terms of maybe he was quite resistant to change, and with how Alan Pace wanted to, the ideas that he wanted to implement into our football club, I still, at the end of the day, I still feel great sympathy, because he simply wasn't given a chance in most parts. So I'll go to you first, Nathan.
I think there's not really any way to dress it up other than the fact that Garlic stitched Dyche up. That's just the top and bottom of it. You give him no cash, which from a business point of view, even like claim to be a Burnley fan, you kind of understand, because you don't chuck money at an asset that you're going to try and sell. Like, it just doesn't make sense in that manner. But if you think the only thing that would have probably kept Dyche in the Burnley job a bit longer is if Pace and Co had taken over 2 or 3 years ago, when that squad wasn't quite at its peak, probably was a little bit past it, but had more than enough to stay up. I think going back to what you said, Will Norris and Dale Stephens in one transfer window. Will Norris is now in League One and conceded 5 at Morecambe the other day, and Dale Stephens doesn't even play anymore. So it speaks massive, massive volumes. But I think the only kind of negative that I have to say in terms of the season that we went down, he had Cornet in August. Cornet was a left back. Cornet was played as a striker for the entirety of the season. Now, he had the tendency to smash a banger in, but as an out-and-out striker, to put chances away, to keep you in the Premier League, I just don't understand it. I don't get it.
I mean, we didn't have any options, did we? In fairness.
He never used to mind playing a 4-5-1. We had Chris Wood, Jay Rodriguez, Ashley Barnes, Matty Vydra. Although Vydra were injured for most of it, he didn't have to play Cornet up front. Cornet had played on the left of a 5 for Leon and on the wing, which in a 4-4-2 probably wouldn't have worked, because with McNeil on one side and then Brownhill or Hendrick before he went on the other side, it was midfielders that weren't fantastic going forward, but it'd offer you a bit of defensive security. So that, in my mind, goes back to me saying that he's resisting change. Yes, he got Cornet, but he didn't use him in the one way that would have been great, by opening his mind tactically and thinking, right, well, maybe I can sit back and have Cork and Westwood as a double pivot and allow McNeil and Cornet to go and get up. There was none of that. He put a left back / left winger up front and just said, to hell with it. So that's my opinion, and I can be quite scathing in my assessment to people, but that's just the way that came across to me, in that across the whole of those quotes, resistant to change and sour grapes.
Fair enough. I mean, the crazy thing is, under Cornet, it worked for the first half of the season. I mean, I think in terms of seeing a footballer at Burnley, I never had so many questions when watching Maxwell Cornet. He seemed to be like the best player in the world at one stage. Like, he was just scoring goals from literally nowhere and just making things happen. Southampton away, just scoring that just random like half volley from like 30 yards out. Who's got the cheek to try to pull that off? It was incredible, and it almost worked. And Sam, to kind of end and put a cap onto this topic, how do you see the end of his tenure at Burnley?
A shame. If I could round it off, it'd be a shame. I think for so many years you play a certain style of way, and I agree with what Nathan says. I do agree. I think he was very reluctant to change, but I think when it comes to Cornet, we were the well-oiled machine, and Cornet was the cog that didn't fit. Like, he was the player that was so different to what we were used to. He was totally different, and that's probably why he stood out, because he had a bit of pace about him. He wasn't scared of taking risks. The rest of them, McNeil went from a season of, assisting left, right, and centre and being the main focal point of getting the ball into the box and creating chances for us, and then all of a sudden he lost every kind of attacking intent, and he was just up and down, sitting back, literally touch tight with Charlie Taylor. And then when we did win the ball back, we were never able to get the ball out because we didn't know how to play going forward. I think when it comes to how we played, it never adapted over so many years. We were always a defensive team. We were always a team that sat in and tried to get 1-0 wins. And, eventually when a game opened up and we were like, oh, we can grab one, we'll grab two. And then we did grab three. That was so rare. And it was rare. I don't think I ever saw us go back-to-back 3-0 wins ever. Or within about the space of 10 weeks, I never saw like 3 wins and they were like absolute romps. It'd be like one crazy 4-0 result against Sunderland, and then we'd scrape a 1-0 against Stoke. Then we'd lose 3-0 to Chelsea, draw 0-0 with United or something random. And there was never any consistency with results. And I think, like I say, it is a shame the way we even have this notion towards Dyche. He is a club legend. The stuff that he's done for us is incredible, and it needs commending completely. But the way that season ended, that last 18 months, it was horrible. It really was. We had no idea. You were going to games and you were thinking we could have one shot on target and that's a win. And now we're in a position where, again, you can't always look to the new and compare it to the old, but just look at us now. We've taken risks with young players. We've taken risks with players from Europe. We've created a scouting network that's willing to go, like Vincent Kompany going to watch Lyle Foster. we've got a manager that's willing to go to Belgium and look at a player from a different country and see how he could fit into the system, and then he goes to the owner and says, "This is the player I want," and the owner goes and gets it for him. And we are now in a much healthier position. As Burnley fans, we're in a much happier position. Long may the whole thing continue. And right now, I'd just say, just enjoy it, because it's worth enjoying. It really is.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember so well, because we've all gone to Burnley games many a time, and particularly away games, that I would go to games just hoping to see like a goal. Maybe I don't care if we lose 4-1. I see a goal, and we celebrated corners like penalties almost. Like that was pretty much the only way that we can actually score a goal is from a set piece. Like the only way. I actually looked for the stats earlier, and like for sample last season, I think we scored like 34 goals or something. 13 was off set pieces. Like that was really the only way we could score goals last year. It was crazy, and really in all other years as well. But let's go on into my next topic, and that was quite a long one to be fair, but I think it needed that kind of maybe closure, maybe is the word to use. So in terms of Burnley right now, we're in a situation that as Burnley fans, we're kind of in a weird spot that it's almost, we're 11 points clear top of the table, right? So what is there to really get that excited about in terms of, we probably already have won a title in terms of percentages, according to supercomputers, if you believe in them, it's 91% likely that we'll win the league. It's 99.3% likely that we'll get promoted. So what is there to get excited about other than hopefully breaking some records? So in terms of the best sides in at least recent Champions League, next year, of course, Championship history, that you'd be comparing us to last year's Fulham team, the Norwich team of 2021, Wolves of 17-18, and Leeds of 19-20. Those are the recent great Championship squads. And in terms of all the stats, you can look into possession, goals conceded per game, goals per game, XG per 90, shots per game, all that good stuff. We were ranked top, joint with Fulham of last season. If you're ranking it by, if you're top of the list, you got 5 points, and bottom of the list, you are ranked 1 point. This was a video from Ben HD that I saw on YouTube going into all the stats. So those are the stats behind it. Statistically, we are joint first in terms of the best Championship side in recent history. So, Nathan, does it feel that way?
Recently it does, yeah. I think the annihilation of Preston after not starting particularly well kind of drew me back a bit and was like, Christ, these lot are on the verge of the playoffs, and we've just absolutely pasted them to win an inch of the life after playing probably a good half of the game, not even out of second gear. I think for me, in terms of best Burnley sides ever, I'm only 22, so yeah, it is by a country mile. I think you pit this Burnley team up against the team that got us into Europe. I think we paced them. I genuinely do. I think we've got that much quality. And with that progressive, I think, we do a real job on them. In terms of fans away from Burnley thinking that we're the best team ever, I think the only way they would is if we beat that points record. I think there's no other way, given the amount of draws that we've had start of the season. I think that's the only little blotch of negativity that will go on our season is the amount of draws we had. So I think you've got to beat the points record if you want other fans to look at you and think, Christ, yeah, these are the best team that's ever set foot in the Championship. But for me, without a doubt, best Burnley side I've seen in 22 years.
And Sam, I'll go to you with that as well.
I think the only thing to get excited about now is promotion. I think when it comes to like Nathan says, other fans, I couldn't care less. I've had years. I live in Leeds. I've had years of people saying, "Oofball, boring, rubbish to watch. Can't believe they're on Monday Night Football." Never cared less. Never cared, because I'm watching Burnley. I support Burnley. I don't care what you lot think. I support Burnley, so I'm watching them. If we get 3 points, great. If it's crap football, I'll also tell you it's crap football. Right now, everyone's coming out with parachute payment FC and all, all this money that we've been thrown into the club and all this type. We are where we are on merit. We've bought loads of players. We sold loads of players. That's why you buy players. Do you want us to play with under 23s and 8 senior members of the squad? Obviously not. So now here we are, 16 new players, then the players we bought in January. Like, we saw it at the start. It takes time. And now here we are, genuinely seeing the benefits.
How dare you buy players with the money that you made from selling your players? How dare you? You should be left with the 7 players left. If we didn't buy any of our players, we would have had, I believe, 8 players left at that club, and 3 of them being goalkeepers.
Exactly. And now look at us.
How dare you spend that money?
But look at us. Just look at us. Like, you spend that money, and it's so many teams in history. Just go look at it. Teams everywhere throw money at people. Eden Hazard was the biggest thing to get Real Madrid at that time. He was crap. And he has been for so long. Money doesn't mean that you become the best team in the world. What we are seeing now is time, hard work, and the backing of the owners, and a manager who cares and genuinely wants us to do well, players that fit the mould, rather than just buying players for the sake of buying players. We've bought players that we think will fit our system. And right now, we are seeing the benefits of that. And you have to enjoy it. Like I said, those last 18 months, they were horrible. You almost didn't want to say who you supported. And that's a complete lie. I always did. But, but you know what I mean? Like, you almost, couldn't be bothered saying, oh, I've got to go to a game today and stuff like that. Like, now, you can finally get excited. We have a lot of chances on goal. We play progressive football. We've got new players. We can change it up. Finally, we get to see a subs bench and a reason for it. And I bashed Jurgen Klopp for years on this 5-sub thing. I'll take it in Championship. I'm more than happy to have that.
I mean, next year, how many people can be on the bench? 9?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, how many subs can you make in the Premier at once? Like, is it 5 still, or is it 6?
5.
I mean, even still, like, our bench in the Championship looks mad. The fact that, like, if we had all of our players available and fit, we're leaving incredible players not even on the bench. Like, just behind them, just part of the squad. It's incredible. So that's why I feel like we're kind of planning ahead for the Premier League. And of course, when we are in the Premier next year, it's going to be a completely different experience in terms of not just on the pitch, the results, the play style, but also the feeling as well. Going to away games for you both, that I imagine go to games week in, week out as well. And the feeling of going to away games is going to be such a different experience. Actually expecting to think, we can take these, we can play these, we can outplay these. Not just that we can hold on and try to get a set piece. We can outplay these. We can go to Bournemouth and outplay them. We can go to Forest and outplay them. We can go to Palace and actually, well, we usually outplay them at Selhurst, but still, you know what I mean? It's going to be a completely different experience next year, and I cannot wait. One final thing before we get into the Millwall prediction. We've spoken a lot of benefits and a lot of positives and lauding these footballers at our club and the play style, and they deserve it very much so. But to play devil's advocate, if there is one weakness in this Burnley team that you would want to look at and rectify in the summer, what would it be, Nathan?
This was the bit I hadn't planned for, because I don't actually know. I think the only thing that springs to mind, and even then that's been rectified, not even through player additions, it's more, I'd expect, training. I think it's just the ability to deal with aerial balls. I think that Sheffield United game, I come off and it felt like a real kick in the teeth, because I thought for the vast majority of the game, we were maybe not outplaying them, but we were the team in the ascendancy. So to come away conceding 5, 4 of which were just comical, it says a lot. But I think standing up to the punishment at Luton away, keeping a clean sheet there, coming away with all 3 points, shows the transition really in the space of about 3.5 months. I think the only other thing, I don't know, maybe just a bit more legs in midfield. Cork this season has been phenomenal, probably one of the players of the season. Do I see him going up and mixing it week in, week out for 38 weeks? Probably not. I think if I could have a mould of a central midfielder that I'd want in Cork's place, it'd be someone like Sander Berger. But obviously we won't get him, but someone of that mould. You know, I mean, when even in the January window, we were linked to Seko Fofana. Someone of that mould, big, can put himself about. You know, he's good defensively, maybe not progressive thinking, but able to lock the midfield down, help us in the transition, because that's where Cork gets caught a lot. Because we're playing on the front foot, and if a team turns us over, he's then got to do 30, 40 yards of a sprint. And, you know, as we've seen, the guy's really good. It's just his legs are going. So he has to give away a cheap foul, and then he plays on a card. And if you're doing that in the Premier League, you're just going to get battered down that channel with Cork. So I think for me, a big unit of a central midfielder, and maybe an experienced understudy to Muric. I think an old body of experience to kind of guide him, because I think we forget he's only 23, which even for a keeper is really young. So I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I think about that. Our goalkeeper like trio, they're all like 23, 22. Like we got Peacock Fowl and Franchi with Muric. I think Peacock Fowl's a bit older, maybe like 25. He's not much older, I'm pretty sure. So that's one thing that to bring back Wayne Hennessy. Essentially, that's what you're saying.
You can laugh all you want, mate. He's actually not a bad shout. Maybe not Hennessy himself, but someone a keeper that's been there, seen it, and done it, like a Joe Hart. Not now, but what he served as when we had Pope and Heaton, Sam Johnston, Jack Butland, a keeper that's been there, seen it, and done it, and he's a bit older. You know, like it's like, because I listened to Ben Foster, and he says a lot that while he was number 2 to Backman, literally the coach has said, just go and be Backman's cheerleader, and his confidence just went like that. So an older head as backup to Muric, I don't think could go amiss.
Yeah, I agree. Looking at the chat, they also say a marquee centre mid to replace Jack Cork long term, says Matthew. Jack G says that we are personally missing a beast in the midfield to break up play. And I saw a link actually on Twitter a few months back, and that was the likes of Lakonga at Arsenal. And the link, of course, he's Belgium, centre mid, but also he played at Anderlecht and he came through the system. Company managed him as well. So he's currently on loan at Palace right now, but that could be something to keep an eye on. Sam, I'll go on to you as well in terms of what do you think Burnley's weaknesses that you think we should aim at in the summer?
I think we've had, I mean, not as much so as I kind of in the first couple of weeks thought we were going to be, but we have got a susceptibility to set pieces where we do deal with them quite well now, to be fair, but when we do concede, it's normally just something out of nothing. I agree with a beast of a central midfielder. I think like a Seko Fofana type player, somebody from the French league. They have brilliant central midfielders nearly all across the French league. So I think a brilliant central midfielder from there would be good. I agree with Nathan about training. I think to adapt on it, it would be more a focus on how things are now is great because we are leaps and bounds above. When we get to the Premier League, we won't be. It'll be a level playing field or people are above us. So we need to understand that we can, like, for example, when I think about a team going up who dominated the Championship and went into the Premier League, is like a couple of years ago, Norwich played Liverpool on the opening game of the season and they wanted to play expansive. And I think they lost like 4-0. And sometimes it is a little bit of a humbling truth that like what worked can still work, but you have to adapt on it because you're playing better players and, you know, better systems and good managers who are tactically gone toe to toe with the best in the world. So that's one of the only other things. The only player addition that I think personally is just a beast striker. If we and I know we've got Lyle Foster and we've got Obafemi, and then we obviously have Barnes and Rodriguez, But I think that marquee striker, somebody who can just grab the goals. And I know we play inverted wingers and we get goals from everywhere, but somebody who could, like a Mitrovic type player, somebody who could just get us 15, 20 goals, be the main reason why we stay up. Like a Girakesh. For me, a perfect player for me to come to Burnley and play up front is Victor Girakesh. I think he's an unbelievable footballer. And if we could go out and splash £18 million on him in the summer, it'd be great. But then again, I could also eat humble pie. And Lyle Foster towards the end of the season could bag 20 goals. And I could be like, okay, fair enough, shut up. So.
Yeah, I saw in a group chat that we're in, someone was saying that potentially Luke McNally doing a good job at Coventry can maybe kind of soften and maybe be like an entree to to the main course in terms of punching a deal with Coventry as well, because it's very clear that we are still interested in Gyökeres. So I would not potentially say that is definitely off the table. I would be surprised to see if for strikers next year that it's not one of who we have right now. I can see J-Rod or Barnes, one of the two, or maybe even both, kind of being kind of fleshed out in the summer, which sounds awful to say, but depends what Barnes wants. Does Barnes want to stay and be a bench rotational player, or would he want to play consistent football in the Championship? Is that his own choice? Whatever he wants, I think that he'd be given that choice. And J-Rod potentially may also get the same as well. So I think that's both their decision in the summer. And I mean, just really any position. I feel like Company, he's already making plans now. There's no way. We all know that he's already on his phone talking to countless footballers, countless agents across the entire world, because we are an attractive team. Burnley were not an attractive team for many years. Players will beg to want to be part of our football club right now, because we saw it with, I believe it was Al Dakir, for example, that he was doing interviews months before we even brought him in, because we had links with him back in the summer saying about how he kind of, he misses his opportunity to come to Burnley and he really wants to be part of our side. And lo and behold, we bring him in and he's a fantastic player and puts his entire effort 110% into the club, and those are the players that we need at Burnley. So it's been a great pod. Let's get into the Millwall game, because we are the only team between us, Sheffield United and Borough who are playing midweek for whatever reason. And quickly before going to it, actually, do you think Borough can catch Sheffield United?
Yes. Yes, 100%.
Is that because you think they can, or because you want them to?
Genuinely think. Got the best striker in the entire division at the moment. Good manager, good young core, good loan players. And every time you watch them play, like, they play not similar to us, because I like to think that we're quite a niche style in the Championship, but they're playing like a team with a lot of confidence and a lot of players with a lot of ability. And then, like I say, when you have a Chuba Akpom who can get on the end of the chances, like night and day. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I do also. I like the idea of Borough going up, because I do like Carrick, but Borough fans, they may not like Burnley so much because of what happened back in 15-16. So I think it may add a bit more spice, I think, to next year if we are both in Premier League. So going to Millwall, of course, currently 11 points clear at top of the Championship. If we win, we go 14 points clear. Jesus Christ, it's February. So yeah. Nathan, what's your thoughts going into tomorrow's game?
I expect it to be much of the same following on from Saturday. Kind of a pump and grind team, similar to what Luton are. I think they've got quite a bit more quality than Luton. That Zion Fleming's a very decent player. Tom Bradshaw got a hat-trick at weekend. It'll be a draw of some description. I can't see there being that many goals in it. I think we might make 4 or 5 changes. I think the result that jumps out at me is a 1-1. Yeah, good team.
Because that's happened like 15 times this season.
Good team. They've got players in form. Tom Bradshaw, hat-trick, Zion Fleming, who's up there, one of the best 10s in the division. 1-1. I think they'll be a lot better than when they came to Turf.
Thomas Hargreaves as well in chat said that, definitely need to sign Bayer, Mats and Teller. And the reason why I'm kind of going back on myself is because I believe we saw that on social media that we should be sending Bayer on a permanent, activating his clause when we do seal promotion, which is when we seal promotion. So some fantastic news there. That would you imagine our centre back pairing next year to be Bayer and Ekdal or something else?
Yeah, Bayer and Ekdal. Can't see us getting Harwood Bellis in a month for Sundays.
And would you be happy with that?
Yeah. I think Harwood Bellis is destined for a move away, and I think even though the company might have first refusal, if you will, purely on a sentimental basis, I think someone like an Everton, someone down there with a bit of money to spend on a homegrown centre back who is. I mean, we've had a joke about it before in Spaces, Liam, but Harwood Bellis will be an England player within the next couple of years if he carries on with his current trajectory. Unless it's a loan, I can't see him staying with us past the end of the season. I'd love him to, because I think his ability to drive out with the ball and his passing range for a centre-half is bordering on ridiculous. So if there was any alternate universe where we can say our City is 15 million quid, don't mean a lot to you, it means a lot to us. We'll have Harwood Bellis, I'd be over the moon, but Ekdal's shown that he can stand up to punishment and he's good with his feet, so I don't mind either way.
Fair enough. So I'll go to you, Sam, about your thoughts into tomorrow's game. To add in, because it is Millwall, we typically they are good at home. They are the fourth best side in the league at home this season. And in terms of the last 5 games, it's been 3 draws and 2 wins. Of course, one being the win, thankfully for us, that they beat Sheffield United on Saturday. So how do you see this game?
I think it could be a different game to when we played them at home. I think they are a good team, but in comparison to like a team like Luton, like when I went into that game, I was a little bit more worried about Luton and a team like that. I think that just based off of, I mean, obviously you can't just look back on our result, but when we played them, they were poor. They were really poor. I don't think they had very many shots on goal. I don't think they had very many shots in general. And I think that was one of our highest percentage possession games of the season. I think we had didn't we have something crazy like 69, 70% possession?
Oh, that's just a normal game.
I mean, it is normal, but like I think it was something like 71% possession, and we literally had so much of the ball. Obviously, recent form is different. They have just beaten Sheffield United, who have also been like us, steamrolling the division for a long time. So you can't necessarily, undermine them in that way. But I personally see a 2-1, and I see us taking a 2-0 lead and it being nervy towards the end. I just think we are genuinely so good. Like, and I have no worries for even if we do lose or draw, that the next 3 games, Company will spark a response and we'll win those next 3 games. Like, so I'm not worried necessarily, and I do think we will do the job.
So 2-1 for you, Sam. Who's your goal scorers?
I'm going to go with Zerere and Obafemi off the bench.
Obafemi, that's a shout.
I really like that guy. I think he's a nice energy to have around the club, personally.
Nathan, what's your score and goal scorers?
I'm going to go 1-1, and I just think it'll just be Teller breaking in behind the lines and a nice finish. So yeah, 1-1 for me, Nathan Teller. Okay,
1-1. So we got 2-1, a 1-1. I guess I'll be kind of fill spaces. I'll go 1-0 Burnley for this game. I think if we're going to win a game like this, it'd be a 1-0, similar to Luton, similar to Stoke. Again, like, I am quite pessimistic. I usually do say it's going to be a draw, but you've covered that base with Nathan. So I feel like I'm going to try and win this war. So I'll go for the 1-0. And my goal score for the 1-0, I hope Teller's fine. I mean, he did kind of walk off a little bit, but I think he's fine to start tomorrow. I'm not too sure. So because of that reason alone, why not? Give it to Barnes again. Give it a 1-0 Barnes. That's got a good ring to it, right? Looking at the chat here, we got some predictions off you guys. We got Paul Walker saying 2-2 tomorrow night. We've got Johan saying 3-1 Burnley from Obafemi Brace. He loves Obafemi too. Matthew Morris saying 1-0, another smash and grab. Adam Drake saying, I think tomorrow night will be the toughest game of the season. Jack G saying 3-1 Burnley. Clarets 1 saying Burnley win. And Thomas saying a 2-0 Burnley as well. We're Burnley fans. We've won 10 games in a row recently. Of course, we're going to think that we're winning. But of course, what do you guys think? Tell us down below in the comments. So to end off each pod, I always ask a question about kind of a nostalgic throwback to the question, which I enjoy asking. So for you two, what's a new one? I didn't actually think about this. So what's a new one I can ask you guys? Who is your all-time favorite Burnley player?
Oh, God.
This doesn't have to mean, the quality or technical levels, just the feeling about it.
I think for me, growing up as a kid, he scored that many influential goals for us. Robbie Blake for me.
Mm-hmm.
The free kick against Tottenham, I was sat in the Longside. It were absolutely throwing it down. I were drenched. And Robbie Blake swinging a 35-yard free kick in, slamming a volley in top corner against United, scoring at Ewood. Yeah, it's Robbie Blake for me.
Robbie Blake, a very good shout. Sam?
Yeah, it's a good shout, but I don't want to just copy you. So I'd probably go with somebody like Danny Ings. I just thought that strike partnership was one of the most unmatched strike partnerships I've ever seen. Like we saw some of our, obviously I'm guessing we're all similar-ish age. We've seen some amazing moments in those years of just out of the blue. We signed Charlie Austin. We signed Charlie Austin and Danny Ings from Bournemouth. Austin got the nod first, and then Ings came in. And you were thinking, oh, Danny Ings, is he going to be all right? Is he going to? They were one of the most prolific strike partnerships, him and Vokes, that we've ever seen. And some of the goals he scored in moments, like that goal at Ewood, just things like that, like just amazing moments as a Burnley fan to just sit there and love. So I'm gonna go with Danny Ings.
I think if you guys know me for quite a while, I think you guys know which mine is. Timo. Of course, he's a cool hero to the club. If I actually try to think about it in terms of who my favourite is, I think over time, looking with hindsight, it's kind of grew on me that I adored Sam Vokes. Mm-hmm. I love Sam Vokes. I think in terms of I love an underdog. So even when it comes to something like this, I also love, because he was kind of an underdog as well in terms of Vokesy and Ingsy. What was it called? Vings? Like it was Vings back then, right? So of course Ings was always a number one and Vokes number two. Same thing with him and Andre as well. He was always a number two, with Andre being the main one as well. So he was always part of those two promotion seasons, and he was a big part in terms of us getting to Europe, and then his goals in Europe, that goal against Aberdeen away. If he never scored that, we may never have been able to go to Athens or go to Istanbul. He was a part of the club for so long. He seemed like he came from nowhere. Well, where did we sign him from again?
Wolves.
Mm-hmm.
Wolves, yeah, it was.
Wolves.
Seemed like he was just kind of a normal kind of player when he was first there back in 13-14, kind of came from nothing. He loved to go against Bastards, of course, the equaliser back in, I think, 12-13 as well. He came with big goals at big times and was there for a large part of that time. And I feel like he's kind of underrated in that aspect. So for me, it's grown on me more and more Sam Vokes. But of course, Robbie is a fantastic shout. I love Ingsy too. We've had some great players that we can look back on and be proud that they repped our club in terms of, Ben Mee, for example, or Heaton, or people in the chat saying Glenn Little or Scott Arfield, for example, as well. So, yeah, I liked how we've ended off this podcast because a lot came on, a lot talked about, 1 hour and 50 minutes. Jesus Christ, that's a long podcast, but it absolutely flew by. Nathan, where can the great people of Burnley find you?
To be fair, I'll normally just be bantering fans of other clubs, but just there at bottom if you want to see me trying to cause havoc.
For podcast listeners, at N19DRK on Twitter. And Sam?
It's the Clarets Roundup page on Twitter. I just love talking Burnley, love talking football. So come over and have a chat. More than happy.
Absolutely. And I very much appreciated both of you coming on. You both do some great stuff. In terms of Nathan, I loved how you rattle fans. And Sam, I do enjoy your post every day about the Clarets. To the listeners on YouTube, Matthew Norris, Paul Walker, thank you guys for being here as well. MKP, George, Adam Drake, Thomas, Hargreaves, Johan the Great, Claret One, Jack G. Thank you all so much for your time. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube if you haven't already. And also give us a follow on Spotify and Apple playlists as well. If you guys want to listen across the world, in your ears, in the car, it's your guys' choice. So appreciate you guys being here. So, Upper Clarets, and we'll see you guys potentially, maybe tomorrow night, actually, of course, for the match reaction. So I will see you guys then.